So today we're going to be making a delicious spinach artichoke dip, and this is one of my favorite all-time appetizers. And unfortunately there are a lot of subpar versions out there, but today I'm going to show you how to make it right, and you're going to love it. So let's do this. So when it comes to artichoke dip, the first thing we need to go over would be the primary ingredient, which obviously would be artichokes. And you have a couple of different options here. The first one being fresh artichokes, and the next one being canned artichokes. Frozen artichokes exist too, but those kind of work the same way as canned ones do, so I'll sort of lump those two together. Now each of these have their own pros and cons. You are going to get the best flavor from these, but they also require quite a bit of work. These require almost no work, you just have to drain the can, and they are still really good. That's what we're going to be using today. Now if you do choose to go the route of fresh artichokes, select ones that have tightly compact heads. They should feel relatively heavy for their size, and they should be mostly green with minimal browning. Okay, to get this artichoke ready, some people leave the stem attached, but I'm going to go ahead and cut it off and start by removing the very outer leaves, and they can be kind of tough and fibrous, so you'll probably have to twist and pull them off. And once you've removed the outer layer, go ahead and shave off the top portion with the knife, and this can be kind of tough as well, so make sure your knife is sharp. After that, continue removing the leaves until you see less green and more yellow, and I'm going to use a paring knife to continue trimming this thing down. Although some people prefer to use a vegetable peeler here, you just have to figure out what works best for you and go with that. And when you get down to the core or choke portion of the artichoke, you'll need to remove the inedible thistles that you see here by scooping them out with a spoon. And honestly, I don't use a whole lot of fresh artichokes myself, so this probably wasn't as precise as it could have been. Well, there you have it. As you can see, it's quite a bit of work to get that tiny little artichoke heart out of there, and you're going to have to do this 4 or 5 times to account for what's in a can. And like I said, these are better than the canned version. I just don't think they're that much better that makes doing that worth it for spinach artichoke dip. Another thing to point out here is that they're going to oxidize and brown, so the solution to that is to dunk them in water and add a little bit of lemon juice to it, and that will stop them from browning while you're getting the rest of them ready. Okay, let's go ahead and get our aromatics ready now, and for that we're going to use 1 shallot and 2 garlic cloves. Cut the shallot into a small dice, preferably 1/4 inch or less, and mince the 2 cloves of garlic. These aromatics are an optional step, but they do add depth and complexity to the final product. And once you've got your knife work out of the way, go ahead and load everything into a medium-sized sauce pot and place it on a burner set between low and medium. Add a teaspoon of butter and sweat everything out until it becomes slightly softer. Set them aside for now, and let's turn our attention back to our main ingredients. Okay, once you've figured out the version of artichokes you want to use for this, you have to figure out which spinach you want to use. I see fresh spinach as the only real option to use here. Using frozen spinach is kind of a pain in the ass. You have to burn through like half a roll of paper towels to dry it up, and it's inferior in quality. So fresh spinach is the way to go. Okay, to get the spinach ready, add about a teaspoon of butter back into the same sauce pot and add 4 ounces of spinach, which in my case is 1/2 of this bag. Add a pinch of salt and continue cooking the spinach until it becomes fully wilted, which should take about a minute. And as you can see, spinach cooks down quite a bit, so now we need to blot the whole thing dry and get it ready to add to our dip. And this step is going to require burning through a few paper towels, but it's still nowhere near what would be required to get frozen spinach ready. This is a very important step because you don't want the final product to become waterlogged and potentially runny, and you also don't want the spinach to bleed out into the dip and turn the whole thing green. So it's important not to skip this step. Now once you've got the spinach fairly dry, the only thing left to do is to give it a rough chop with a knife. You don't have to get too crazy here, just chop it up enough to where there aren't any big stringy pieces left. And for now, go ahead and load it back into the sauce pot and set it aside for the moment, and we'll come back to that here in a few minutes. So when it comes to selecting a scooping mechanism to eat this stuff with, you can see here you've got quite a few options. My personal favorite are these pita chips that are in a bag. They're fully ready to go, require no work, and they're really good. Another item that requires no work are tortilla chips. These are also really good. And those are my 2 favorite choices for stuff that doesn't require work. And then we can begin to enter into the realm of stuff that actually does require work. And most of the options for that are going to come down to slicing and toasting bread. I've got some sourdough bread here, which is a really good choice. Ciabatta bread is also a good choice. Baguette will work really well. Today though, we're going to be using this pumpernickel bread, so let's go ahead and get that ready. Okay, to get this bread ready, just grab a stack of about 4 or 5 pieces and cut them down the middle with a knife, and then arrange them onto a sheet tray, and I'm going to brush them with a little bit of olive oil, but melted butter would also work here if you want to use that. The oil will help evenly distribute heat across the surface and assist with proper browning, and once you're finished with that, place them into a preheated 400-degree oven, and it should take about 15 minutes for everything to become crisp. So while that's getting ready, let's go over options for toppings. Most of the time you just put cheese on top and place it under the broiler and let it get melted and brown, and that's a really good option. But I kind of like the idea of breadcrumbs, toasting those on top and having a crunchy topping. So let's go ahead and do that today. Okay, to make the topping, pour some breadcrumbs into a pan, add a small amount of melted butter and toss the whole thing together until the breadcrumbs are evenly coated, and place the pan into the oven alongside the bread. That should take about the same amount of time in the oven as the bread does, so let's turn our attention back to our dip. Go ahead and add the shallot and garlic mixture to the pot with the spinach. Okay, now we're at the point of the recipe where you have a couple of different options for putting this thing together. The two most common ways for making spinach artichoke dip are, one, to make a bechamel sauce, which is milk plus white roux, and then add cheese to that to make a cheese sauce, and then add the spinach and artichokes beyond that. The other method is to just melt cream cheese into the pan, and that's the method that I think is the best, so that's what we're going to go with today. Go ahead and add one 8-ounce package of cream cheese to the pot and try to not struggle removing it like I did here, and once you have that out, add a pinch of salt, set the heat to low, and make sure you stir this throughout the process because you don't want it to scorch at the bottom of the pot. Okay, now that we have everything in the pan, it's important to point out here that you want to keep the heat low and you don't want to cook this for any extended period of time, because two things can go wrong with that. The cheese can heat up too much and curdle, which there's no going back from that, and the spinach, also being a green pigmented vegetable, can overcook and turn into this drab olive color and take on a bitter flavor. So you only want to cook it to the point that it's hot enough to eat. Okay, we're also going to add 2 tablespoons or 1 ounce each of mayonnaise and sour cream to the pot, and 1 can of artichoke hearts that's been thoroughly drained and roughly chopped. Give it a stir and let's check back in on everything that's been in the oven for a few minutes. You can see that the breadcrumbs are nicely browned and our rye bread has become crisp. And I guess I'll go ahead and stack these like this because I got all these damn cameras and lights and shit all over the place. Okay, you can see now that our cream cheese has become fully melted, so we can go ahead and stir in 2 ounces of shredded Parmesan cheese. And once that becomes melted, we can go ahead and plate this whole thing up. You can obviously use any bowl you like here. I'm going to go with this small square bowl and fill it nearly to the top and finish by garnishing with our browned panko breadcrumbs. And the cool thing about doing it this way is that it doesn't have to go back into the oven because it's already browned. Now if you do decide to go the route of a cheese topping, just add the cheese on top and place it under the broiler for about 5 minutes until that topping becomes browned. So once you have your topping figured out, to finish this thing off, place the bowl on top of a larger plate and fan out the rye bread pieces around the bowl, and that's it. All that's left to do now is to devour the entire thing. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. I appreciate your viewership and thanks for tuning in as always, and we'll see you next time.